So yeah, we're gonna see some stuff.
Pink princess crown.
That's a teddy bear.
You want to be talking into this.
Into this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's fine. Do you have a little bit clarity also on who listens to us, like the profile?
There's a handful of moms that listen regularly. I know that. All right. Well, welcome to Catching Up. We are sitting here with João Ribeiro. Not even close.
No, it's good.
It's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could be worse.
Give me a minute. For me, this has been a podcast that I've wanted to record for a while because you and I haven't met very often in person, but I'm often in conversations that include you, and I'm certain that you're in conversations that include me. And I think this is a good meeting point for us to go over a lot of the topics because I'm fascinated by your role at the Ocean Cleanup. You cover so many bases from the political, ethical, social side of this plastic problem that we have on this planet. And I'm often in the field having conversations with locals, having conversations with government officials, having conversations with so many people talking about this side of the physical plastic pollution problem and just waste problem in general. And I'm so glad that we now are focusing so much attention on this because for so many years we were sticking to we're a technology company, we focus on the technology, but there is so much behind the scenes that goes into what we are doing. So just start off and tell me what your role is at the Ocean Cleanup and what exactly it is that you are doing here.
Thank you, Dan. And it's really great to have this chance. It's good to introduce what we are doing in global affairs, in public affairs. So I'm what we call the General Counsel and Director of Global Public Affairs. So I have a lot of responsibilities with the legal obligations of the company. That's the General Counsel part. But what really gives me energy, to be candid with you, is to be the Director of Global Public Affairs. And what we do there is to lead our engagement with the governments, also with international organizations like the United Nations, for example, and what we call the like-minded institutions in the blue community, or those institutions that operate, advocate, work with the ocean matters like Ocean Conservancy or WWF and many others. So basically, we have realized, and I think everybody agrees, that the problem of plastic pollution is absolutely massive. All the data that we read, all the articles that we read on a weekly basis, it's not getting better, it's getting exponentially worse. A recent report, for example, of the OECD says that plastic pollution leaking into the environment will probably triple by 2060. Even assuming that we do some stuff now. So the problem is massive. And we are realizing that, of course, we cannot do this alone. So we have to build coalitions. We have to help others. We have to provide data, knowledge, science, so that others can also act on it. So that's basically what I'm trying to do, build bridges with others, so that hopefully together we can solve the problem.
And one of the main bridges that you build is with the governments of some of the countries that we are putting not only interceptors in, but also governments that all are affected by what's happening in, say, the GPGP. And with this comes the political side of it, where, to be blunt, things don't often happen as fast as they should for how fast this problem is happening on this planet. How do you see this? How can you help change this problem? Because we've learned that it's not as simple as saying, here's a river, here's a problem, throw an interceptor in there, and pull trash out and get it away from making its way to the oceans. We run into roadblocks that are elections in countries. We run into roadblocks that are governments not necessarily believing that the problem is theirs. We run into many different types of problems that come with some of the countries that we are putting this technology?
Well, then, first of all, we now don't call elections a roadblock. So basically, elections are part of the life of those countries. And so it's true that in some countries, elections can be more disruptive of commitments, of long-term commitments. So now we are learning to incorporate those moments in our planning, in the way we deal with with the governments and their bureaucracies. And so we are more aware of that. We have to understand that we are providing a service, a technology, but ultimately it needs to be owned by local stakeholders, local communities, local governments, local private sector. Otherwise, we would come in a little bit as an alien thing that doesn't build ownership. And our projects and our deployments in rivers, for example, they are not just about intercepting the trash and the plastic. Of course, that's the ultimate goal, but they also have other side effects. So when we deploy a shiny interceptor original that we so much like to see the amazing images that we capture when they are operating, there are other effects. So it really raises attention, it makes the problem much more visible, and therefore the local communities become much more aware of the problem. And so that in itself will change some behaviors, as we say, upstream the river. By raising that awareness, the communities become also more sensitive to the issue, and they will put more pressure in their authorities, their political representatives. And so that will also enhance and will increase support for allocating taxpayers' money to solve the problem upstream and midstream. And so it's much more than just intercepting plastic. And that's what we are, of course, now understanding, realizing, and happy that those effects also come by. Because one of the things that made me join the company was this very clear message that we want to put ourselves out of business. And so by doing this, of course, the interception in itself is not solving the problem, but it's accelerating the solutions upstream and midstream. We know that these issues of waste are linked to waste management investment in certain countries. Those are massive investments. For that, you need taxpayers. You need that to be a political priority. Politicians need to feel that they can allocate taxpayers' money into those priorities. So what we keep saying is that our projects are accelerating all those processes that would take much longer if we were not there.
So it's not only drawing awareness to the public who obviously see the problem, but then when they see an interceptor that has a shiny ocean cleanup logo on the side of it and Coca-Cola or whoever, it draws more attention also to the governments, right?
Yes, because when you raise awareness, when you raise engagement by the communities, when you make the problems more visible, that helps politicians prioritize where they will focus their attention, their actions. And so what we are doing is basically bringing the topic of plastic pollution and riverine plastic pollution going up the list of priorities. And that, of course, gives more comfort for politicians to act.
And we try to do this. We don't try to do this. We do this. I can speak on behalf of the communications team and you know, being one of the people that is in the field often where we're focusing attention on some of the issues. It's very difficult sometimes to share the story with the world without this feeling of a finger being pointed at a certain type of country or a certain neighborhood or government. I'm trying so hard to be politically
You're being
correct.
very diplomatic.
Do you like that? I think I'm going to jump into
You are coming from my job. You started by saying that you love my job, and now you are being so diplomatic.
Yeah. So we try not to point fingers, but there are problems on this planet that the GPGP is its own beast because it's very easy to it's a completely different beast. We can go out there, we can focus all the attention in the world on what's out there, but it's more difficult when we go into some of the countries where we're implementing this technology to show the people why we're there. But it's also as important to show the world and to show other governments and other partners and other people around the planet why we're there, right?
Yes, but listen, of course, one of my key roles here is to avoid that our crew, our colleagues, our organization goes out there finger pointing. That's not our role. We don't do activism, we don't do advocacy, we don't do politics. That's definitely not our role. Also, we have to be a little bit more aware and sensitive to the realities of different societies. There are different priorities. Each society is focusing on different issues at the time. Some maybe are putting more focus on access to housing. Others are putting more focus on access to education. Others have to deal with rampant corruption. I mean, every country has its own challenges. There's no such thing as a perfect country. I mean, I'm quite aware of the theory of the American exceptionalism, but that's not the topic of our podcast. So every country has problems, and of course, it's not our role to go and say, you are solving this problem, but you should be solving the other. That's not our role. Each country will sort it out. So I get your point that sometimes we go to these countries, to some countries, and we see that the problem of waste management is almost borderline insane. The quantity of garbage that is near the rivers. But again, we are helping everybody, those communities, to come up with solutions. And I think that's our role. We should not, definitely never, go out there and say that we are an organization of what we call now the global north, coming around the world trying to save the world from its own sins. That's not what we do. We are an international project. We have over 35 nationalities working here in this organization. That's quite rare, unique. Very few organizations at this level and of this size have that level of diversity. And that diversity is important because, again, it allows us to be very aware, very linked to these communities, to understand the problem in a broader way, and be more effective when we are deploying these technologies. I do think that if you look at Google Trends, and I shared this in one of our meetings, and if you put plastic pollution, you will see that now it's growing exponentially. But at the time that Boyan started the mission, and after his TED Talk and starting the mission, it was not very trendy. You don't see it going up on Google Trends. Only later it starts going up. And so that means that, I mean, for sure it was not only us, there are dozens of organizations working in this field, but I think we can be confident to say that we contributed very significantly for global awareness on plastic pollution. And it's not by accident that suddenly all the governments agreed that they should come up with a UN treaty, a United Nations treaty, an agreement between states to address plastic pollution. It's actually called an instrument, legally binding instrument to address plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. That's the official name. It's a typical UN name, long and unattractive, but that tells you that there is global momentum to address this. And some people say that this will be at the scale of the Paris Agreement. So it will have the same level of attention that the Paris Agreement has for climate change. And so, again, I think that we should be proud of what we have done, because I do believe that we contributed for that momentum to address plastic pollution.
Dig a bit deeper on this topic. Tell me more about what this UN plastic treaty is and how important it is to us, and obviously how important it is to this issue going forward.
Yeah. So the treaty will be negotiated over 2 years, 3 years, which is rather unique, fast. Usually these processes are quite long. And the idea is that we come up with an international agreement that all states agree upon, that tackles plastic pollution throughout the whole cycle of plastic pollution, from production to leakage into the marine environment. So, of course, it's a negotiation. So you have 193 countries. Some are recipients of pollution, others are major producers of plastic, others are more affected than others. The small island development states, for instance, in the Pacific, are fairly affected by it. And so everybody comes together around the table and has to put everything into a text. And also on top of countries, you have private sector, stakeholders, organizations like us that come in with their demands, their aspirations, their wishes, their expectations, and all of that needs to be put into a text with 20, 30 articles. And so it's a massive operation. There's a tricky point there. It needs to be agreed by consensus. So everybody needs to agree on it. Let's say, I know you have a big American audience. Let's say that you have a perfect Thanksgiving dinner where everybody agreed throughout the night on every single topic in a big family. So you can see how challenging it will be. What is the consequence when you have to have these consensual agreements is that you will tone it down. So you have to agree on the most basic stuff. And so you will probably not solve all plastic pollution, but you will solve parts of the cycle. Some people want to cap plastic production. They want to reduce plastic production in absolute terms. Others want to shape the way plastic is produced so that it uses components and chemicals that are not harmful or that down the line are more easily recycled. And so that will improve the capacity of recycling of plastic down the line. Others want to focus on waste management obligations. We want also that interception and riverine plastic emissions, so the emission of plastic pollution that the rivers produce towards the ocean, we want that to be a criteria of measuring plastic pollution, like you measure carbon emissions as a measure of impact on climate change. We want the treaty to recognize that emissions from rivers of plastic pollution will be a key metric to decide and to monitor how plastic pollution is being addressed. Think with me, if over 10 years the plastic floating in rivers keeps going up, that means that politicians, UN, everybody can be telling whatever they want, but there's no effect because whatever they say they are doing upstream and midstream, it's not working because the plastic keeps going up in the rivers. If we see a decrease in our catch, by the way, in our monitoring of our catch, then we can say something is being done. Mm-hmm. Upstream, midstream, governments are really dealing with it. So one of our main asks for the treaty is indeed that the emissions from rivers are a source of data, of metric, and we will be in an excellent position to share that data, to share that knowledge with governments so that we know that the plastic pollution problem is being addressed. The other, I know I'm talking too much about the treaty, but the other big topic that we really want to bring to the table is legacy plastic pollution, what we call the legacy plastic pollution, the plastic that is already out there in the ocean, in the gyres, what to do with it. So we don't want states to ignore it because, states organize themselves into laws, into this big word called jurisdiction, where they have the power to exercise their government power. We are operating in a place that is beyond what we call beyond national jurisdictions. It's out there. It's a little bit like the Wild West 200 years ago, 150 years ago. And so we don't want states to say, it's out there, it's not my jurisdiction, it's not my problem, it's not my backyard, so why should I put resources, why should I put an obligation to clean it? We want to make the case that this is a common good, it's a global responsibility. The plastic did not come from the sky. I mean, it was not like an alien spaceship that came and dropped the plastic in the middle of the ocean. So there's a collective responsibility. And we want the treaty to recognize that and have a text that says that the global community states have an obligation to clean the legacy plastic in the ocean.
I very much appreciate all of this, and I want to play devil's advocate for 1 second, because as a person that has,
You know I'm a lawyer, right?
yeah, this is what I love, the challenge. As a person who has, I've seen all aspects of this plastic pollution problem, and I hear about this treaty, and I'm, as I said earlier, I'm fascinated by this conversation because it's something I've wanted for a long time. But I gotta ask the question: do we have enough time for a treaty? Do we have enough time for politicians to sit in a room, to come up with this, talk to this government, do this, when every second there is so much plastic flowing out of rivers, making its way to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and every other gyre that's out there? In your opinion, do we have enough time for this?
Well, it's not an and or situation, in the sense that it's not because we are negotiating a treaty that we should not be doing other stuff. And it's not because we are going to do the treaty that everything will be solved. So there are good success stories, like I don't want to get into a legal discussion, but there's the Minamata Convention on Mercury, there's the ozone layer issue that, as you may know, it was because of a treaty banning certain substances that we managed to control the expansion of the ozone layer hole, and we see now that there is an improvement on the ozone layer. So there are previous examples where through a treaty international agreement you solve massive global problems.
Yeah.
So some people will say, yeah, but look at the Paris Agreement, we are not solving climate change. Well, that question should be mostly addressed to countries like the US, for example, to the extent to which that they were in, they were out, now they are in. I mean, but that's another discussion.
Yeah.
Just to say that there are good examples and bad examples on how treaties really accelerate global solutions. It should not stop us to keep doing what we are doing. It should not. Nothing prevents governments to decide today to implement the measures that they want the treaty to have in 2 or 3 years. Yes, the treaty should not be used as an excuse for not to act. So states, they come to the negotiating table. And I said this, by the way, clearly to the Dutch government. Governments are asking their stakeholders what should they bring to the table. And what I've been saying to some governments is, this is what you should bring to the table for the negotiation over the next 2-3 years. But nothing prevents you domestically to immediately adopt these measures so that we accelerate the impact of the treaty. So the point here is we should all try to, again, we are helping raising attention on the topic, but we individuals should talk with our representatives, with our governments, and make sure that they are acting on the problem and not using also the plastics treaty as an excuse to solving it at a slower pace over the coming years. The problem is massive. It's a massive emergency. People that travel a little bit more, I'm not going to name countries because all countries, including in Europe and in Northern America, many rivers are emitting plastic. So the problem is truly global. Of course, in some countries, the impact is becoming very problematic, affecting the livelihood of people. There are 3 billion people that depend on seafood to get proteins, and research is showing that you are finding microplastic in a lot of our food chain. So it's also becoming a health risk. We are really dealing with a massive problem that we created, and so we really need to solve it.
And then that's why I get so scared, because I sit there and I again appreciate this concept, this idea. But when you're standing there on a river and you're just watching a constant flow of trash going out, it scares the hell out of me, thinking that we have to wait for this.
No, we don't have to wait. We are acting.
Yeah.
So that's the point.
We are acting, and we're acting as, this is another topic of conversation that I love hearing you talk about. We are acting as I'm going to say it, small Dutch organization right now. But I love your philosophy on this, because I cannot agree with you more. What is the problem with us being a small Dutch organization?
Well, first of all, it's an inaccurate description. I see it on media. I see it sometimes, yes, other organizations referring to us. I see sometimes the Dutch government insisting on that idea, but that's incorrect. We are an international project that has headquarters in the Netherlands. It was founded by a Dutch, true, but we are an international project, as I said, with 35 nationalities working here. We are operating in 9 different countries. We have a regional representation in Southeast Asia, in Kuala Lumpur, and we are operating beyond national jurisdictions in the middle of the ocean. And if anything makes us a global initiative organization, is that.
Not only that, but also our relationship with the United Nations.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about this and where we're going. I know you have some stuff coming up with the UNDP in the next month. Where are we with the UNDP, and how important is this partnership that we have with them for the future of all of these projects around the world?
Yes, so UNDP is one of the largest, if not the largest, agency of the United Nations. It's the United Nations Development Program. It started as a program. It's now a massive organization that really assists many governments in developing their school system, their waste management system, a lot of support in developing good governance policies. So it's really a partner. It works a little bit like they have offices everywhere. It works a little bit like the embassies of the United Nations in these countries. And they have regional representatives, they have country representatives. And it's really the face of the UN in countries around the world. They have offices in 170 countries, so they are very much intertwined with development actions, working closely together with local governments. They know the local governments, they know the local stakeholders, they are on the ground.
Yeah.
We have been talking with UNDP, and finally we are signing this partnership with UNDP, where we are trying to address some of, and let me be candid, some of the criticism that sometimes we hear in relation to our mission, that we are just acting downstream. So this partnership with UNDP is really joining forces for each of the organizations to do what they do best. And together we are implementing this partnership that we expect it to act as a whole of society intervention to address plastic pollution, where UNDP will be doing what they do best, helping to change policies that can address plastic pollution, mobilizing policymakers to change whatever needs to be changed to address the plastic pollution upstream, midstream, bring also those stakeholders to beach cleanups, engage with youth, while we join that effort with our interception technologies. So we are one part of a whole of society program led by UNDP. And I think when we join these programs and these actions, we of course will have an impact which will reinforce all the actions upstream, midstream, with society, with policymakers, with the youth, with the local communities. So basically we are putting together a whole cycle of intervention that addresses plastic pollution in these countries. So this will be operating on different countries on a case-by-case basis, depending on the level of support, of funding. We will go together to ask funding for states that wish to fund this initiative, and we are looking very much forward to work with UNDP.
And we've had a good history with them already down in the Dominican Republic with Interceptor 004. We've worked quite closely with them. We've had the opportunity to, see what they're capable of doing and the doors that they're able to open. This was huge even during the COVID time when we were still putting out technology, because the doors they were able to open for us, we aren't necessarily able to open it as a international organization.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we are still a small organization and operating in so many different time zones. It's not easy to have access to governments, to open the doors, to ensure that there's political support, that there's bureaucratic support, that we have in place people that help us fulfill all the legal obligations, get all the permits, all the licenses. So it's a massive operation that I don't think sometimes it's fully appreciated. Indeed, this partnership with UNDP should be able to help us on that part of the deployments.
When you look around, we're in Rotterdam right now, we're at the headquarters of the Ocean Cleanup, and when you look around at all of the different elements that we have going on here, where do you see us in the community in the blue community, as you mentioned, or in just the global community of this topic that we are trying to take on as an organization?
Well, we are an organization, not a company, that indeed deploys technologies, and so focuses very much on research-based deployment of technologies. Before we go in, we do a lot of research. We try to match the best technical solution to what the research shows to be the best way in. And so we are very unique in that sense because we walk the talk. We don't just talk. Now my role is pushing us into more talking.
You're very good at it too, by the way.
But yes, but most importantly is the rest of the crew that is doing the walk.
Yeah.
And that puts us indeed in, as you say, we are in a very unique position because our partners, our colleagues, other stakeholders in the blue community, sometimes they don't get us. Are you doing activism? What are you trying to do? Are you just putting machines? And so indeed, we are in a very unique position. I have been arguing that we should be seen as an innovation and technology stakeholder. And that's where we are positioning ourselves, both within the UN system as a whole, but also in the plastics treaty negotiation, where we feel that innovation and technology is not being part of the conversation. And so there are a lot of innovations. It can be social innovation, economic innovation. There's a bunch of systems on plastics credits, plastic offset. There's a big conversation going on there. And technology, improving to the extent possible, very sustainable recycling technologies. There are some startups there. And ourselves in terms of interception, in terms of cleanup. But also a big part of what we are progressively doing is monitoring. Using AI, using algorithms, cameras to monitor plastic pollution. So again, we are indeed an innovation and technology stakeholder in this field.
But what's our biggest roadblock? You've been here for a while now. You've been a part of a lot of these projects. You've seen them go from start to finish, not finish, but from start to working. And we continually are running into roadblocks. In your opinion, after the time you've been here, where do we keep getting stuck?
Well, two different aspects of our roadblocks, if you wish. Rivers is one thing, ocean is another thing. So our rivers operation, I think the major roadblock is that this is a very complex problem across borders. We are dealing with many countries. And in some countries, to be again very frank, sometimes the bureaucracy takes the biggest part of our allocation of resources. There are instances where you have to deal with 3 or 4 different ministries, where to deploy a machine you have to deal with 3 or 4 different licenses and permits. The fact that we are transporting these interceptors and these machines, that's a transfer of technology. But there are rules and regulations sometimes that make it harder to cross borders. We are dealing with crossing a lot of borders with different laws, different rules, and that slows us down a little bit. But we are also working there, by the way. Again, this is the negative part. There's another international organization that people are not very familiar with, that the US actually has the presidency this year. It's called APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Community. And within the APEC, we are discussing ways of states to address these trade barriers to clean up and interception technologies. And we hope that through that conversation, again, doing the talk, states will do the walk to remove those barriers and make our operations less costly and faster. So that's the major roadblock. In ocean, I think the major roadblock is that we are in the middle of the ocean. And it's a massive operation. It's an expensive operation. We are working very hard to make it more efficient, more affordable. And so far, no single state in the world has financed that part of the operation. So we need to start having a frank conversation with the governments of the world, asking, should you join in this mission? Should you join our effort? We know now the impact that plastic pollution in the ocean has on biodiversity. It affects over 100 protected species, endangered species. We know also that there's increasing research on the negative impact on the food chain, microplastics. So we remove the macroplastics, but then it degrades. If we don't remove them, they will keep degrading over decades. So more microplastics will go into the food chain. So is it a good idea to just keep it going and maybe later on have to deal with massive health issues across our populations? So that's another issue. Another impact, very interesting research is coming about the impact of plastic floating in the ocean on the acidification of the ocean and also on the capacity of the ocean to absorb carbon. I think it's too early to make that call, but again, we do not find any good news about plastic floating in the ocean. So why shouldn't governments step in and help us deliver this mission?
It's a great question.
That's what I'm asking them every day.
Let's talk about Joao for a second. What drives you? What keeps you so passionate about this? I'm sitting here loving watching you talk, and I just see that like sparkle in your eyes, and you're just going and going and going. What is the main driver that keeps you going?
Well, I'm not a millennial. Sorry, I'm not an English native.
You're not a millennial. No, neither am I. So we're on the same boat.
So I know that now there's all this thing of working for a purpose, all that philosophy, and people talk about it like if it's a new thing. But I always worked for a purpose throughout my life. I was always fortunate enough to have jobs that indeed was linked to a purpose that was always larger than myself or my specific career. And I'm just doing the same that I've been doing my whole life. I started very young as an activist at 14. I sat in front of a Shell gas station not because of climate change, funny enough, at that time, but because Shell was signing contracts to exploit oil in East Timor waters, territorial waters. And at that time, East Timor was struggling for independence from Indonesia. And I found that contract absolutely immoral. And so that sparked something in me. And since then, I've been fighting the good fight.
Did you look like this when you did it, or were you more hippified? Did you have longer hair and a more ragged beard?
No, the beard is fairly recent. No, I didn't look that radical, no.
A lot of athletes get into something that they call the zone. It's when a guy can't miss shooting three-pointers, or every time he gets up to bat, he gets a hit because mentally he's in this place. All the stars are in line. You just can't do any wrong. What does the zone look like for you when you're in a place, when you're talking to, I mean, you're rubbing shoulders with some incredible people making decisions that are going to be historical, I would say. what does it look like when you're in these meetings or you get talking and you get in the zone?
Well, it comes fairly naturally, and I think the main reason is that I've been in these settings in all the possible roles. So I've been negotiating treaties on behalf of my country some years ago. So I was representing the interests of a country. And so that you come with a different positioning and a different language. I also worked for the United Nations and other organizations. So you are on the side of what we call the secretariat, the organizers, the facilitators, where you have to be much more neutral. You have to listen everyone, all the positions, and then you have to come up with proposals. And now I'm yet in another side, which is the so-called civil society side, the observers, the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, which usually come with more talk, more activism, more demands, more aggressive, and that all creates a balance. So I have this kind of advantage in the sense that I've been in the three sides of the equation. So when I'm in the zone, the other stakeholders, the representatives of states or representatives of the UN, they might get a little bit confused because I sound like them, and so that really, I think, makes my life easier, and it helps me to bring our points and bring it across the table. So yeah.
So you're able to just sort of adapt into the person you're talking to.
Well, not in a opportunistic way, but I understand which language and which factors tick the box for them to join in for a win-win situation.
Okay, and the last question: where do we need to go from here? What direction do we need to go in? We talked about all of these things that are happening. We know what our mission is. We know what our goals and ambitions are. We also know what the reality is. We've learned that very much over the last years. Where do we need to go to be successful?
We need to build more partnerships. We need to be an aggregator. We need to be a platform. We need to be a spearhead. We need to lead the innovation and technology interventions in the field. We need, and we are already, even if we don't realize, but so often I come across younger startups or newer, better said, newer startups or newer organizations in the field, and they already look up to us. We are becoming old, and we inspire many to start new initiatives in the field. And so we have to keep building those partnerships, those coalitions, those platforms, so that our life becomes a little bit easier and we deliver the mission.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to it. Thank you so much, man, for sitting here. This was a great conversation. I really do mean it. This is one I've been looking forward to. And everybody that is listening to this, I'm going to answer one question for you right now is why are we sitting on YouTube watching this? It's because we're trying something new. So in addition to being able to listen to this on Spotify and of course Apple Podcasts and everywhere else that you get your podcasts, we have now been putting this on YouTube because we want you to be more interactive with this. We want to hear your questions and we love the comments. So please send them to us so that we can take these to people like Joao and people like Laurent and people that we sit down and I need more questions to ask these people when I'm sitting here because otherwise I'm just trying to think of it all on my own. So if you're listening to this on YouTube right now, and yes, we are aware that it's just a photo, it's not a moving video, but please do listen, put it on, and then if you have any questions, put them right down at the bottom of this page in the comment section, and we will get them to the people that we're talking to in the future on Catching Up. So thank you again for the continuing support for this podcast, for our mission, for everything we're doing. And yeah, if you hear what Joao's talking about, we have a wide road ahead of us and we're going to knock this problem out. So thank you all. Joao, have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.